You know, your brain has cheat codes. Seriously, little loopholes that can make learning feel almost like you're cheating. And these are the exact same hacks used by everyone from medical students trying to memorize thousands of terms to Navy SEALs executing these flawless missions under fire. The thing is, they're not necessarily smarter than you. They just know how to exploit the system.
But before we get into the hacks, we have to talk about the core problem. And we've all been there, right? You study for hours, you feel totally confident, and then a week later, it's like it's all gone. So why does that happen? Well, it's because your brain is literally wired to delete information. But here's the secret. That's not a flaw. It's a predictable pattern, and any pattern can be exploited.
And this is what that pattern looks like. It's called the forgetting curve. So on day 1, you're at 100%. You feel great. But by day 2, you've already lost half of it. And by day 7, you're clinging to maybe 10%. It's a brutal, completely automatic process happening inside your head.
But what if you could fight back? What if you could actually flatten that curve and make what you learn permanent? Well, there is a system. There's a set of exploits that turns your brain's natural tendency to forget into an incredibly powerful tool for remembering.
Okay, so here's the game plan. We're going to cover a 4-part system to do just that. We'll start with the mindset, then get into the core technique of active recall. After that, I'll show you how to lock those memories in for good, and finally, how to turn all of this into your own unfair advantage.
All right, first up, the mindset. And honestly, this might be the most important part because it goes against pretty much everything we've been taught about learning. It all starts with a very counterintuitive idea. Learning that actually works is supposed to feel hard.
Just look at these 2 paths. Over on the left, you've got comfortable learning. You know, rereading your notes, highlighting pages. It feels so productive, but it's a total trap. The real magic happens on the right, with what scientists call desirable difficulty. It's supposed to feel like a struggle. That struggle is the signal that it's actually working. And here's why that is. Struggle is a biological signal. When something is easy, like just passively highlighting a sentence, your brain basically thinks, no effort needed here, probably not important. Let's delete it. But when you really struggle to solve a problem or to recall a fact, your brain flags that information. It says, whoa, this is tough. This must be important. Save it. That confusion you feel, it isn't blocking your progress. It is the progress. Now, for a really extreme example of this, let's look at something called stress inoculation. See, most of us, we study in a quiet, calm, comfortable state. Then we walk into a high-stakes exam or a huge job interview, and poof, our minds go completely blank. Why? It's something called state-dependent memory. Your brain links information to the state you learned it in. So the Navy SEALs, they flip this entirely. They don't learn in a quiet classroom. They're memorizing mission details while swimming in freezing water with instructors screaming at them. The big takeaway here is you've got to match your learning state to your performance state. And you don't need an ice bath to do it. You can try simple things, like recalling facts right after a tough workout, or maybe practice a presentation in a noisy coffee shop. By creating just a little bit of stress while you learn, you make sure that information will be there for you when the real pressure is on. Okay, so once you have that mindset in place, we can move on to what is maybe the single most powerful learning technique out there, active recall. This is all about shifting from being a passive consumer of information to an active participant in your own learning. Think of it like this. Your brain has 2 modes, right? Storage and retrieval. Most of our traditional studying is all about storage, just trying to cram information in by reading and watching and listening. But the real learning, the part that actually creates strong, lasting memories, that only happens during retrieval, when you're actively pulling information out of your brain. So, how much of a difference does this really make? Well, it's not a small one. It's actually massive, and it all comes down to this number. So get this. In a landmark study, one group of students just reread material over and over. The other group, they just tested themselves on it once. A week later, the group that tested themselves remembered 50% more. This is huge. It shows that testing isn't just for checking what you know. Testing is the most powerful learning tool we have. Every single time you force yourself to recall something, you are strengthening that memory. So how can you put this into practice? Well, here's a super simple, really powerful framework. It's called the 3-2-1 method. First, read your material 3 times, but with a different focus each time. Big picture, then details, then connections. Next, and this is key, put everything away and teach it out loud twice. You will immediately find the holes in your understanding. Finally, write down everything you remember just once. Writing is slow, and it forces you to be honest about what you actually know versus what you think you know.
Of course, the SEALs take this to a whole other level with what they call immediate application. They'll learn a new combat technique, and literally 30 seconds later, they're sparring, trying to use it for real. They fail, they mess up, and that failure sends a panic signal to the brain that says, I needed that information and I didn't have it. This is important. Do not delete. By trying to use information right away, even when you're not ready, you completely eliminate that gap where forgetting happens.
Okay, so you've embraced the struggle and you're practicing active recall. Now for the final stage. How do we make absolutely sure this information sticks around, not just for a few days, but for years? How do we forge truly permanent knowledge? Hey, remember that forgetting curve from the beginning? It turns out you can hit the reset button on it. If you test yourself on something right as you're about to forget it, say on day 2, the curve resets, but it also gets flatter. The memory lasts longer. Then you test yourself again on day 7, and it gets even flatter. This is a technique called spaced repetition. By timing your reviews just right, you're signaling to your brain over and over that this stuff is important, and it needs to be stored for the long haul. Now, this next technique, interleaving, it's going to seem weird because it directly contradicts how most of us were taught to study. We learn in blocks, right? You master addition, then you move to subtraction. But it turns out, research shows that mixing topics up is way more effective. You do an algebra problem, then a geometry one, then another algebra one. This forces your brain to learn not just how to solve each type, but to recognize which strategy to use and when. And let me tell you, this process of interleaving feels confusing. It feels messy. You constantly feel like you're losing your place. And that's good. That confusion is your brain building the mental flexibility it needs for a real-world test, where questions are never neatly grouped by topic. That struggle and practice is what leads to fluency when it really counts. And finally, let's talk about one of the oldest memory hacks in the book, used by ancient Greeks and modern Navy SEALs. It's called the method of loci, or a memory palace. It works by hijacking your brain's incredibly powerful spatial memory. You take new information, like the main points in a speech, and you mentally place them in locations in a familiar place, like your own home. To remember everything, you just take a mental walk through your house. It's amazing.
So we have the mindset, and we have the techniques. But why is this more than just a bunch of clever study tips? Why does mastering the skill of learning give you a real, genuine, unfair advantage in your career and in your life?
Well, the answer really comes down to one simple number. A number that actually defines your career velocity. People who are skilled at learning get promoted 30% faster. Think about that. In an economy where industries are constantly changing, the single most valuable skill you can possibly have is the ability to learn new things quickly. Your learning speed is, quite literally, your earning speed. These aren't just study tips, they are career accelerators. Look, the system is pretty straightforward when you break it down. Embrace difficulty, practice pulling information out of your brain instead of just stuffing it in, and use smart strategies to make it all permanent. The people who are still studying the slow, hard way, they're playing a completely different game. You've just been given the cheat codes. So the only question left is, what are you going to learn first?